Record to, there we are. Great. So I was looking at your schedule. You have a lot going on starting
Well, yeah,
middle of March.
I don't know how my calendar fills up like that. And it's not, it's just all through the summer and it's a very busy year. But yeah, as you get older, you just want to pack things in, I suppose.
I guess so, right. Well, it looks like you're going to the UK for a little bit too, for part of a book tour.
I am, and then I will go to Germany for a book tour in late May.
Wow, that's great. So those are great times to be over there.
I know, I'm glad I'm not there in the winter time. Although I have to say, I mean, I've always been a fine flyer, but lately with all the airline stuff that's going on, it's like I don't want to get on a plane these days.
It's a little nerve-wracking, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Did you know that you have to, and I didn't realize this, but to go to the UK, you now have to file online to get to pay some kind of fee to go
Yeah,
to.
I did that already. So apparently that fee is good for 6 months or so, so I'm fine there.
Oh, I didn't know that because my husband and I are planning to go to England in the fall. So
Uh-huh.
I was reading up on it, and he said, "Yeah, I guess we have to make our plans ahead of time in order to make
Yeah,
this application."
yeah, it's pretty easy. It's all done online. And then they just once you're in their system, you don't even need to carry any documentation because you're in their system. And when you show up, they know.
Is it each country or is it just for your for the EU?
UK is separate.
Uh-huh.
EU, I don't think EU has their system set up yet, but it's coming.
Mm. Well, it's like if you want to go to if you want to go to Venice, you have to pay a fee. I mean,
Right.
everybody, that's what's happening. I guess that's what's going on today.
Yes, it is. I mean, I go to this place in the Caribbean, and every year you have to file ahead of time a visitor tax, and
We do
I mean, you
too,
can do it
yes.
when you get there, but it takes then you're in a separate long line, and you don't want to do that.
We just got back from Barbados and we had the same thing happen where we
Yeah.
had to file online and I forgot to do it. And fortunately, I arrived in the midweek. There was nobody there. There were no cruise ships. So I just walked up to that kiosk and went through pretty quickly. So let's talk about your new book, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I read them in reverse order.
Hmm.
First I read The Summer Guest, and it raised a lot of questions for me, but it was a really exciting book because first of all, it's writing about characters who are not who are of a certain age that I could
Yes.
relate to, as I'm sure you could relate to.
Right.
And in this particular case, it's in The Summer Guest, it seemed that this was more of a domestic thriller than an
Mhm.
international thriller. What made you go in that direction?
Well, I this first, the whole series, first of all, wasn't supposed to be a series. I just wrote that first book, The Spy Coast, and I thought she's a spy, she lived abroad. So there are a lot of international settings in that first book.
Yeah.
The second book was inspired by something very local that I had learned about the retired CIA community that lives in my town. And that is that we had a branch of MK Ultra operating in this town in the 50s through the 70s.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, that's really interesting. How do I work this into a story?
Yeah.
So that's why I chose to make it, more close to home. But also, I wanted to show more of Joe Thibodeau, my local police chief,
Yeah.
and how he operates and how she learns to finally kind of bond with these retired spies to work together.
So how did you find out about the MK Ultra program?
I was speaking to the daughter of one of the CIA people who was in the program, and she said, "Well, why my dad came here. He was working on MK Ultra." And I said, "What?" And so I began to look more and more into it and found out we had I think it was a pretty small group of people here who were mainly working with magic mushrooms, I believe. All these psychoactive drugs that MK Ultra was involved with. I think the mushrooms were the big one here.
Well, I'm used to all that stuff because we had Timothy Leary living down the road.
Oh,
And he was the king of psychedelic drugs.
yes. Yeah. Well, this it was a weird time in the CIA history where they were really, they were believing in ESP. They thought you could do remote viewing as a spy. And they were originally thinking these drugs might be useful to, improve your ESP abilities.
Hmm.
But in the meantime, they were also looking at these drugs as useful in interrogations. I mean, how do you get into that human brain?
Right.
Um, and it really all came out because of the death of that one CIA agent who was
Hmm.
unwittingly taking LSD. I guess his colleagues were unhappy with him, and he fell out of a window and died. And then that, of course, broke open the whole thing.
Right.
We had congressional hearings, and it was quite a scandal.
Now, in the book, you start with this event that happens in 1972,
Mhm.
and was that a prologue? Because it kind of read like a prologue. And I was interested that it wasn't told through Reuben the son, as opposed to having this event begin the book. Can you tell me a little bit about what made you choose that to go in that route?
Well, that was at the last scene I wrote when I was working on the first draft, because I didn't know that there was going to be a prologue. I started off writing it thinking it was going to have a very quiet beginning. One of these, oh, summer in Maine, people are here for their summer homes,
Yeah.
everything is. And I think my first line of my original draft was, it was a perfect summer day,
Mm.
because so many summer days here are perfect. And I got to the end and I thought, well, there's a really traumatic, horrible thing that happened, which is referred to in the book. I
Yes.
need to show that. So I wanted to show it, and yes, it happens in the 70s, right as MK Ultra was ending. And I thought it had to be a prologue because that way, when it's referred to later on in the story, you know the horror of what happened that day.
Mhm. It was that was interesting because it sets the tone and it sets the question of the entire book. And as you're
Mhm.
going through the book, you're thinking, okay, how does this relate? And again, you don't find out until the end, obviously, but it really, I thought, got the book going and rolling along. Now, you said that you've talked a lot about your community of spies that live or retired spies that live in Camden in that area. And in this book, you talk about Maiden Pond. Is that a fictional location, or is that also inspired by a true location?
It is purely a fictional location. But I mean, we have so many ponds up here and so many lakes. And in fact, I have a little cottage that is on a pond. So yeah, it's just inspired by our geography. And we have so many summer people who come up and they have homes on lakes and they have homes on the ocean. And a large part of the book is also the conflict between people from here and people from away. I mean, there's so many levels of conflict in the
Yes.
story.
I
And
want
like inside the family, there are conflicts too.
Well, I wanted to ask about the have and have nots that you talk about, and it really is it's a commentary on these two classes that really exist in the summertime community. I think you see it anywhere. Anytime you go to a resort
Sure.
area, you have the
Yeah.
wealthy people that own the homes, and then you have everybody else that works there. Was that at all inspired by what was going on with the immigration crisis in the United States today?
No, that wasn't. It was inspired by just what I see here in the summertime. We have all these workers who come sometimes from other countries, Eastern Europe, Jamaica. They come to work on these giant hotels taking care of
Yeah.
people with the money to stay in these hotels or to stay in these houses. And it just happened that, yeah, we're having an immigration crisis right now where now we can't get the foreign workers to come in anymore. It's just very, very hard. And there are not enough local workers to man the hotels. But no, I think the haves and have-nots, that's a theme that goes back to caveman days, I suppose.
Now, another commentary you make really is about aging, because you're talking about a group of older people that really society doesn't thinks that once they're retired, they don't have any kind of contribution to society. And in essence, Joe is one of those people.
Yes, yes. Jo is in her mid 30s. She's a local girl. She's a good, solid main character. She's a good cop. Um, but she's young. And so when she deals with these these older spies. In the first book, you find out she doesn't even know they're spies. She just
Right.
thinks they're meddling old people. Um, and again and again, especially in the first book, they are always steps ahead of her. When they're investigating something, they come up with stuff that she didn't even think about. And it's making her both questioning her own ability, but also wondering, who are these people and how are they always ahead of me? So here in the second book, she knows who they are.
Mm,
And she's come to appreciate their contributions, even though she can't always use them or she can't always acknowledge that she's getting help. So it's that again that conflict between youth and older people. And you're right, I could not have written this book 30 years ago. I
mm,
needed to be this age. I needed to know what it feels like to be older, to be maybe overlooked or not valued by young people who think they know everything, but they don't. And I think there's also a value to, I guess I would just call it history, institutional history
yeah.
that is really not appreciated. I mean, we can see that now when so many people are getting fired from their federal jobs and they have the institutional history. But young people do think they know it all, and they need to be re-educated.
But Maggie uses that to her advantage, though, because she says, I am not seen. And that allows me to do things and get into places and have access that I wouldn't normally have.
Yeah, being underestimated is a really big thing if you're a spy. It's a great thing if you're a spy. So yeah, they can use it to their advantage. And it's also to their advantage that I think that young people don't appreciate that these older people have a history, they have wisdom that can add to solving crimes and solving, any kind of a mystery in town. I'm surrounded by them. I just attended something called the Camden Conference, which is a global affairs conference that happens here every year. I mean, here we have a town of 5,000 and we have ambassadors and generals and Pulitzer Prize winning journalists come to this little town to give these talks. And I look around at the audience and it's all gray haired. It's 500 gray heads sitting in these chairs and they are sharp as tacks. When I hear the questions they ask, they have lived abroad and they're very aware of what world affairs is.
Mm. Do you think they come to Maine to escape?
I think they come to Maine because they have become familiar with it either through their work or through their travels or through their summer, their summer experiences. That's one of the questions that I've been asked and have asked myself. Why are so many spies here?
Mhm.
How do they end up here? Well, a lot of them early on in the CIA were from, I guess you would call them their blue bloods. They come from Boston and New York, and so they would spend their summers in Maine, and they're familiar with Maine,
Mhm.
and it seems like an obvious place to retire. But we've also had, as I said, MK Ultra was up here.
Yeah.
And Maine is a place of safe houses. If you wanted to hide somewhere, you'd put them in Maine.
Mm.
Um, we also have a lot of military and a lot of State Department who lives up here too.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Maggie. I'm intrigued by her, and I kept wondering whether or not Maggie Bird was her real name. Are these people going by their real names, or are these names that they've adopted post-retirement?
Well, Maggie does have a previous name, and she
Yeah.
just changed her last name. So she herself is living under a different last name. The others, though, have it's their names. You don't always have to change your name,
Mhm.
especially now that they're in retirement. Nobody knows who they are. They can go back to their birth names.
Are they worried about since drawing attention to themselves because they're becoming involved with these crimes?
I think they feel pretty safe. At a certain time, nobody's coming after you, unless they're on
Well,
some,
in the
unless they're
first
on some
book.
hit list in Moscow.
Why did Maggie change her name?
Well, she had a married name, and then
Right.
after everything that went wrong, and she knew that there were forces that would be looking for her. She did change her name.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and you in the Spy Coast, you see, yes, they're back. They're coming after her. So she was wise to try and adopt a different name.
Do you think she has regrets about her life? Because in the first book, we know she was married.
Hmm.
and she never had any children. And I get that feeling of regret as she develops her relationship with Callie. That seems like that's going to be the closest that she's ever going to have to having a grandchild or
Yes.
someone else.
Well, that was I always try to find the emotional core of what a book is about.
Mm,
And The Spy Coast is really about, I suppose it's about she'll be forever mourning what happened.
mm,
It's regret. You're absolutely right. Regret is one of the big words for that particular book because things she did, things she chose to do in that first book really destroyed her life or destroyed the life of the man she loved. So now she's thinking back on her life, and we all do. We have this, we review what we could have done differently.
right.
Things we wish we had done differently. And that's where she is in the beginning of The Spy Coast is she's thinking back about the man she loved,
Mhm,
the man she will always love. And she's thinking, well, what if I had done this? What if I had children? And now I have a chance. I have this young girl who lives next door. So she is almost against her will making new connections.
mhm.
And she does say that every time you fall in love, every person you love is another chink in your armor.
Right.
It's something that makes you vulnerable. And she's tried to avoid that, but sometimes you can't help it.
But it also seems that she's become more vulnerable by her connection with the people in the Martini Club because
Yeah, yeah.
they were spread all over the world, and it seemed like she had a tangential relationship with them. You know, it was very limited. But now that they're living together, she's really bound up with them. Does,
Uh-huh.
doesn't that
As
make
I
her more
said,
vulnerable as well?
every connection is a vulnerability. And yes, maybe she feels like now is the time she could be vulnerable because there is no enemy coming after them.
That's
And you'll find in the third book those connections even increase the vulnerability more as Ingrid and her husband become in a precarious situation. But there's also something else they have. Besides the vulnerability, they have this sense of having been in the trenches before. And some of the strongest relationships you'll find are men who've been in battle together.
Mhm.
That is a lifelong thing that they are always going to share. And this group of people also has a little bit of that. So that is a connection that they will never shake. Certainly not as the series goes forward.
That's interesting. Now, um, you said that you originally conceptualized the Spy Coast as a standalone. What
Yeah,
made you decide to turn it into a series?
I fell in love with the characters.
There you go. It's always about the characters, right?
Always about the characters. So I got to the end of the Spy Coast, and the editor wanted a series, and by that point, I thought I'm not ready to give them up. I want to know what they do next. And that is where the best series come from. It's not about really these books are not about plot. It's not about the complexities of the twists and turns. It's really, do you love these people? And this is a group of people I wish I had a Martini Club. I wish I could go somewhere and gossip over booze, once a week. So no, I think it's just a matter of not wanting to leave them yet.
Now, when you create a series like this, do you have a an arc that you where you know that they're going, or do you have a character Bible? How do you develop these characters in this series? Or is it just
I
by
have
the seat of your pants?
I have no arc. I have no character Bible. I just start writing, and I don't even know who they are until they'll say something. It's as if the best revelations happen on the fly. So I didn't when I was writing the first book, I did not know what happened to Maggie's husband when I started. Is he
Hmm.
alive? Is he dead? Did they, was he a bad guy? Is she going to discover that he betrayed her? I did not know until I got to the point in the story where we do find out what happens to Danny. So that was when that happened. It was just as devastating for me as it was for Maggie. So those are the kinds of things that you discover them because they become real people, and like real people, you don't know things about them until they tell you.
Did did Danny really die?
Well, I know it's a spoiler, but yes, he's gone. He's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah. I was hoping that, maybe he would be resurrected because his body's never found. It's
Yeah,
floated over the ocean, and I was
yeah.
really kind of hopeful that maybe Maggie would find happiness, but it seems like she's moving in that direction now. I don't want to do any spoilers, but she's moving in that direction, right?
Well, the trope is it's a common trope that the dead man comes back to life and he's still there,
Right.
and I thought I'm going to do the anti-trope and just make it,
Kill him.
yeah,
He's done.
he died.
So I understand also that the Spy Coast is in development by Amazon and MGM. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes,
You and
it
James Bond. You and James Bond.
well, the funny thing is, I have been published by Random House, by, Simon and Schuster, by, I guess traditional publishers. And part of the reason I went with Thomas and Mercer was that it came with an attached television deal. They said,
Mm.
come to us because our television, the wing of Amazon really, really wants this as a series. So I thought, well, yeah, this sounds great because it feels like a television series with multiple characters and especially older characters. I mean, we finally get to see gray-haired people having adventures. So,
I like that.
um, so they have a pair of sisters who are the showrunners who wrote the pilot episode, and the pilot episode I've read the script. It's fantastic. It is really, really good. And now it's been kicked upstairs, and we should have a decision in the next couple of weeks about whether it's going to be greenlit or not.
Mm. Are you going to be an executive producer?
Yes, I'm going to be an executive producer.
Yay!
Doesn't mean I'm doing anything in particular, but except giving them some advice and continuing to write the books.
That's exciting. And I also read that you got a development deal with NBC for Vacation.
Yes, I do, for a completely separate television series. In fact,
Yeah.
I'm about to turn in the pilot episode script in probably in the next hour once we get off. Uh, yeah, it's also a series set in Maine, but it's very, very different from Spy Coast. It's almost autobiographical. It's about an Asian woman who moves to a small town in Maine. She's like the Martian in town. But this character is an LAPD detective who has left California because she's fed up with corruption and things that have gone wrong in her job. And she's retired and she's in a little town in Maine and she gets to Maine just as the local police officer gets eaten by a bear. So
The
she
cocaine bear.
so she becomes a sort of a friend and a partner to the local female veterinarian who is determined to prove the bear is innocent. The bear did not kill this man. And lo and behold, they find out it was a murder.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden she's back solving crimes, but in a small town in Maine.
That's exciting. That's fun. So you've written the script yourself?
Yeah, I have a friend and I pitched the script. NBC loved it. And so we're about to turn in the pilot episode.
Oh, that's exciting. Do you sleep? It sounds like you've got so many things going on. You've got your next book in the Spy Coast series. You've got these two development deals. I'm sure you do other things other than write as well. And you're traveling. You're very busy. Do you sleep?
Well, I think it's more a matter of when you really love the project, you just can't wait to get back to it. And that's not always the case. Okay. There are points in every project where you go, how did I get myself into this? I hate this book. Please let me do something else. But you get over that hump and then all of a sudden it seems like you're on a downhill slope and it becomes easy. So yeah, I've tried to retire. I am a failed retiree. Every time I say this is it, this is my last book, I finish the draft, I turn it in, and then maybe 2 weeks later, I think, wait, I have another idea. So as long as I still have ideas, I'll keep at it.
So can you tell me about the Shadow Friends?
Yeah, The Shadow Friends. This is the third book in the Martini Club series, and it takes a closer look at Ingrid and her husband. Now, Ingrid is a fellow spy. Her husband, she's married to a man who is a retired CIA analyst, so he was never actually a spy. But they have this very cozy domestic relationship. He cooks dinner for her every night, and then out of the blue, one of her ex-lovers shows up in town during during a local global security conference. And this is a man that sh she's still attracted to him, but she decided not to marry him. She married Lloyd instead. So this introduces a new crisis into her life, not just in her marriage, but also there is an assassin that they had dealt with years before who seems to be back at work, and he's trying to pull Ingrid back into the field because he needs her help. She's torn between her husband and between her ex-lover, and so all these incredibly wonderful conflicts are going on. And if I were to say there was one word of emotion that defines this book, I would say it's longing.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. Will you be doing other books in the future that feature Ben and feature Declan? Are we moving
I
away
don't
from
know.
Ben?
It's too early to say. It's like I have to finish this book first, and then I'll see what I feel like doing.
Yeah, that's exciting. I was looking at your website and I noticed that you had a problem with your Facebook page.
Oh, yes.
Has that been resolved? That sounds like a nightmare.
It did get resolved. And yeah, and, just briefly, I do so many podcasts
Mm,
like this. And so when I get invitations, I'll often say yes. And this was a very legitimate sounding invitation. They wanted to do a Facebook Live interview.
mm,
And the week before, they wanted to do a technical check for lighting, et cetera. And then they said, can you give us administrative power so that we can make things run smoothly? So
mm.
big mistake. I did.
Yeah.
Luckily, my Facebook page is it's unattached to anything else, and it's not attached to any of my other social media or finances or anything. So they hijacked my Facebook page, and it took me almost 3 weeks to get it back. And it was difficult. It was difficult dealing with Facebook because you're pretty much dealing with AI.
Right. Right. So how did you get it resolved? Did you have to hire someone to fix your?
I I was very, very lucky. I dealt with a publicist she has recovered her clients' Facebook pages before,
Mm,
and um and that's how we got it back. And it did require a lot of documentation and et cetera, things like that. I mean, Facebook wanted to see everything from your W-2s, your tax returns, to make sure you are who you are.
right, right.
And so we were able to give them the documents.
So what do you do when you're not writing? What do you do for fun?
Oh, I travel. And I cook, and in the summertime I garden. So I do all the traditional, domestic, homey things. Um, but a lot of the times I'm just really curious about a large range of details, and you find that curiosity is what leads you down paths towards other books.
Mm,
Uh, I mean, if I hadn't been reading about MK Ultra, I might not have thought about this story, and if I hadn't been interested in foreign affairs and my interesting neighbors, I might not have come up with the Spy Coast. So you're always asking questions, always trying to read up on new things that you don't know about.
it's a switch from the medical from the medical oriented
Yes.
thrillers that you've written.
Yeah, I've written over my 30 books. I've written not just medical thrillers, crime novels. I've written romance novels.
Mm,
I've written historicals. I've done a science fiction, and I've done a ghost story. So it's more about what suits your fancy at the time.
mm,
Writers are too often stuck in this one drawer. The publishers
right.
want them to write the same kind of book again and again. And that to me would just kill my creativity if I were limited that way.
Mm. Do you uh, do you find that there's pressure for you to go in a certain direction, or you just say, "Look, I'm done with this. I'm moving on," and they accept that?
Yeah, no, there's that pressure is always there. And I understand it from a publisher's point of view. They know how to sell that particular genre that you're writing. And then you say, well, I want to write a ghost story. And they go, we don't know what to do with that. So my answer is always, look, I'll just write it. You see what you can do with it. And that's how it worked. And of course, those out of genre books never sell as well. So the publishers have a point. But they're very nutritious for us as writers. We just need to do that every so often.
What one piece of advice would you give a writer?
Um, don't stop in the middle of your first draft and change projects. I think it's really important to just keep that forward motion. Every book has its dark moment where you think, I cannot finish this book.
Right.
And I have gone through that with every single book I've written, where I get to the middle and I thought, this is a horrible book. Let me do something else. But you just work through that hard point and you keep on going to the end. And it's only at the end of the first draft when you've seen the shape of where the story is going, that you can feel like, yeah, I can go back and fix all the bad parts.
Yeah. Now I have a question. When you're writing a book and do you revise as you go along, or do you write the whole book and then go back to the beginning and then start to do your revisions? And I'm
I,
asking this because I'm at that point. I've just finished my first draft, and I'm
yeah.
at the point where I'm going through and cleaning it up and trying to find the arc of the story. I know where the story's going.
Yeah. I don't revise as I go along. I revise, I
Yeah.
finish the first draft.
Mhm.
And then and this is probably the worst part of the whole process is you get to the end and you look at it, you go, oh my God, this is a horrible book.
Yes, that's what,
So a large part of it is fixing things.
yes.
And if I feel like there's a point in the story that doesn't make sense, I will go, I will write other scenes that need to go get put into various parts of the story. So at that point, I'm kind of like shuffling puzzle pieces together
Hmm.
on the second draft. But once you have that first draft, you have something to work with. If you
Right.
don't, yeah, if you haven't written that first draft, what are you going to work with?
I view it as like a lump of clay or a lump of marble, and I've created that marble, and now it's up to me to chisel it and create that
Right,
final product and polish it and polish it. You know,
right,
so
right.
and it's I was particularly interested in the first chapter of your book because I'm writing a story now where um there's an accident that's happened 5 years ago. It's an automobile accident. And that's the key that everyone is talking about in the story. But I
Hmm.
never have a scene where the person is involved in the accident. We see the death. So I was
Hmm.
thinking, okay, I have to go back. I do need that prologue. I need that. And reading The Summer Guest really gave me the courage to go back and do that. Because
Uh-huh.
generally prologues, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't.
Right, right. Not every book needs a prologue, and in
Right.
fact, I probably only a third of mine have prologues. But sometimes it's absolutely necessary to give that background or to start off your book with the proper emotion that you want it to have. So yeah,
Yeah.
don't be afraid of them.
Have you ever written a book and thrown it out or put it
Not
in the
in
drawer?
not in many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I started off, I have a lot of like books that I maybe have three chapters in them, and then I put them aside. And that was early on in my career, but nowadays I have learned to just keep on going, to
Mm.
keep on looking at it. The most important thing for me is that I can hear the voices of my characters, and once they start telling the story to me, that really is a big help.
My husband says that I play with my imaginary friends.
Yes, they are. They really are. I know. And the first thing they say to you can set the entire tone.
Yes.
For instance, when I was trying to think about my book, The Spy Coast, I heard Maggie's voice, and the first thing she said was, "I'm not the woman I used to be." And you
Mm,
hear that and you think, okay, who did you used to be? What is going on? Why does your voice sound so sad? I can hear you're an older woman. What happened? And that just starts you going.
mm. Interesting, really interesting. Well, this has been so much fun. I really have enjoyed talking to you.
Well,
I,
thank you. Thank you.
I had a list of about 12 questions and we covered every single one of them.
Well,
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. So I'm just trying to look and see what we have. If I've done everything. I have. Oh, let's one more question. I want to go back to Maggie. She's a farmer, or
Mhm.
she's a farmer wannabe with this egg business. Is
Yes.
is that something that is it just a hobby to keep her busy, or is it a way to connect with Callie?
No, it started off as a hobby and then it's kind of worked its way into kind of a mini business. I think Callie just came along, Callie became a character that came into her life just because that's the neighbor. But I put the chickens in there because my son used to have 70 chickens.
Oh, geez.
So I was familiar with chickens and their personalities, and I thought that sounds like something she would do.
Well, they're like, well, eggs are like gold today.
I know they are like gold. I wish we still had those 70 chickens.
Yeah, really, exactly. I was thinking about that this morning, going to the market and seeing that there are no eggs there. I mean,
Oh,
it's really something else.
yeah, disaster.
It is a disaster. Well, I want to thank you, Tess, for spending this time with me.
Well, thank you, and I hope your readers, your listeners, enjoy the book.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what happens. I write the review has already been written. After talking to you, what I do is I do five
Yeah.
questions with Tess Gerritsen. So I'm going to distill the things that we've discussed today and encapsulate that. It'll probably be out. They usually release them on release day.
Okay.
So
Fantastic.
I will send you a link, and you'll see the review. And I'm
Okay.
excited. I'm excited for this. And hopefully, when the next book comes out, I'll send you an email and say, "Hey, Tess, can we talk again? I want to
Sure.
know more about these people in the Martini Club."
Okay. Sure will. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again. Nice meeting you, and I hope I'll see you at a conference soon.
Okay. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye-bye.